Welcome to the Success and Networks and ETA Opportunities for Veterans. I'm Kurt Sardiga. I'm going to be your facilitator of sorts here for the next 45 minutes or so. The purpose of this workshop is to equip veterans with practical tools and proven frameworks for success in the ETA space. We'll discuss how veterans can leverage their story, networks, nonprofits, and veterans benefits to find, acquire, operate, and exit the right business. But before we get started, we've got Veterans Day coming up here in just under 2 weeks. I just want to take a moment. I'm sure we've got a lot of veterans in the audience here, given the nature of this conversation we're going to have. So just want to pause and say thank you for your service to your country so we can be here and doing things like this today. So at this point, I'm going to pass it off to Alex Burkhart. He's going to be our MC, facilitating the discussion. Alex is a serial entrepreneur and a professor of entrepreneurship at the University of Cincinnati. Not sure if he's a Bengals fan, but we'll let it slide anyways. So, Alex?
Actually, grew up about Mansfield, Ohio, so I'm still a Browns fan, unfortunately. But my wife is a Bengals fan, so. But yeah, happy to kind of facilitate today's conversation. Like mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Core business is an Amazon delivery business, so I have 200 employees that deliver packages throughout Cincinnati. And I've supported several entrepreneurs in the ETA space. Most recently, in July, helped a veteran entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur, become an entrepreneur, and we acquired Tri-State Elevators. It's an elevator business, maintenance business in Cincinnati, Ohio, and got to see kind of meet the group through that kind of connectivity and everything, and so happy to continue to support the organization. And so what I think I'll do here is I'll pass it over to each panelist and kind of tell a little bit more about your background, and then we'll have some questions from there.
Hey, I'm Patrick Flood. I was Green Beret in the United States Army for about 26 years total. Got out in 2021, worked for a financial services company called Anderson, formerly Arthur Anderson. Went to a different business school in North Carolina. And afterwards, realized that as I was working with veterans transitioning, that a lot of them were acquainted with entrepreneurship only through the lens of startup. And that I am, as I spoke in the larger room, a third generation entrepreneur myself. Both my grandparents or grandfathers plus my dad bought businesses. They were all veterans, and it seemed to me to be a much less volatile or risky way to be able to become an entrepreneur. And like was said at the second panel that was coming in, you don't have to worry about market fit. You don't have to worry about a lot of the other things that a startup entrepreneur has to worry about, but you do have to be astute during diligence and understand what it is that you're buying, because eventually, like I think, what is it, Colin Powell said years ago, if you break it, you buy it. So the goal is for you to understand what it is that you're getting into, and for us to be able to, as an organization, mitigate the three main factors for a post-acquisition failure. The number one reason is a poor acquisition. Number two is lack of experience. And number three is personal issues. Personal issues for veterans typically mean that they're doing it by themselves. They're isolated. They've transitioned out of the military into a community sometimes that's not home. And for us to be able to make sure that they're connected to a community, whether it's virtual or ideally getting them back to a place where they actually want to live. I was talking to Ali, who's coming in from Charlotte, North Carolina. He's one of the Promise Partners folks, but he went to Case Western, and he's a great example of someone. When I was talking to him, and I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, Ali, I was like, where do you want to acquire? He said, anywhere. And I said, where does your wife want to live? And he goes, Tampa. I said, okay, great. You want to find a business in Tampa. So it's those basic questions that are really going to help, from another veteran, coach someone into something that becomes a much more promising path. So thank you for having me.
My name is Ryan Krogi. I'm with First Internet Bank. I specialize in SBA lending. I've been doing this for 26 years, and I do a lot in the M&A space, very, very big in the ETA space. So I'm here to talk about how to utilize SBA lending to leverage your acquisition, low money down, better terms, and just how to structure it appropriately in the type of businesses that you're looking at, and how a banker is going to look at it through their lens as well.
Good afternoon. I'm Vince Liuzzi. I'm the president and managing director of Transworld Business Advisors. I lead the Cleveland Metro, Akron, and Canton business for the company. We are the nation's largest business brokerage firm. We have 250 offices and 800 agents, 49 states and 19 countries globally. So we're pretty extensive in terms of our footprint. I work directly with small business owners, helping them achieve their strategic goals and objectives and providing smart M&A solutions. We help them grow, sell, and acquire business opportunities. Specifically, we'll help veterans and all of our clients identify the right business, put together some financing opportunities, and help with transition post-closing. Those are some really important components and services that we provide.
Well, appreciate you guys sharing your background. I'm going to start the first question over here to you, Patrick. There's a lot of moving pieces that can occur, right, when you're trying to navigate, especially as maybe potentially a first-time business owner and a veteran transitioning into the space. What would you say is like the first step that you would recommend someone take?
So I obviously, as every panel that we do, that's usually the first question. So what I don't want to sound like a lawyer, but it depends. But really, it doesn't depend. It depends on two things. So one is know thyself. And so that's one of the biggest problems I think that veterans have, or challenges that veterans have when they're transitioning, is they've done something that defines them. And this includes spouses as well, is that you've been defined by a specific lifestyle and a specific job and a specific mission for a very long period of time. And so I think because of that, there are deeper questions that we haven't asked ourselves of, where do I feel psychologically most secure in the United States? Do I feel comfortable talking to my spouse about what I'm going to do with a company as far as like, how do I distribute free cash flow, or how do I actually invest the money? Do I understand specifically like where I want to, where my safety nets, where are my psychological safety nets coming from to be able to help me? Is it a veteran transition organization? Is it a community? Is it my family? What is that stuff? And identifying all of that stuff first, which then is going to answer probably 90% of your questions as to whether or not you should even pursue an acquisition. The second thing that I think is really important to understand is that most transition organizations talk about your transition into another W-2 job. So it's more of a find your market value, don't get anchored too low, go to where the money is, and figure out, from there how you can best contribute in whatever company you're in. And veterans always do really well in leadership in different organizations. We always, pull up people behind us, which is unusual, I think, for a lot of companies, but it's what we do. We've always trained our replacements. The thing that we are not really great about thinking is the fact that what you're actually doing when you're buying a business is investing in an asset. So something that eventually you're going to be selling to another person. So in that, because I think a lot of the emphasis has been on even startup entrepreneurs, and we're working with a bunch of startup entrepreneur veteran organizations right now because the startup entrepreneurs didn't envision an exit. So part of that is that they haven't done the succession planning. They haven't considered when they're going to actually leave. And the longer they wait for it, the lower the value of the company is going to become, because the more crisis-oriented their exit's going to be and less planned. And there's going to be fewer advisors. Part of the reason that I'm even doing this is because my dad, who's a veteran, exited his business that was realistic valuation now that I've gone to business school, done what I've done, is probably about $4.5 million, and he sold it for $575,000 because we had a family crisis, because he got a family attorney to prepare it, and sitting across the table from him was a hospital corporation with 2 private equity M&A attorneys. And so he thought he was getting a great deal, which I think a lot of us would have, is that he tripled his annual salary. But the reality of it is that he didn't realize that he was selling an asset. And so in that, there were 3,500 patients within his community in Northeast Wisconsin, and ended up losing a provider. And then 3 years later, it was a strategic buy, it turns out, and they closed the clinic entirely and pushed people to a hospital that's 27 miles away. Mortality rates spiked, all the other stuff. I would love to say that that's unique to my family and that's a terrible family tragedy. The more that we've been doing this, and Alex, you could attest to this, happens all over the country. And one of the biggest groups that gets preyed upon are veteran owners, because we don't have a big depth or deep bench of people that are in M&A, brokers, advisors, to be able to help us get ready to exit. And sometimes because of that, we've mixed personal and professional or business finances, which impacts our valuation later on.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And I think that just kind of goes back to the importance of the education in this space, whether it's here at Case, through the Promise Partners organization, through your organization, Owners and Honors, like just continue to educate people on even some of the stories where, hey, that you could hear it in your why, right? Like the reason we're doing this is because we want to avoid some of the pitfalls that maybe could have occurred in other places. So kind of shifting over here to Ryan on the financing front. Obviously you come out and you think, hey, well, do I have enough capital to actually buy a business and I need to partner with the right people? Can you kind of comment on the various sources you sometimes kind of help entrepreneurs think about, but then obviously on your end, how does the bank come into play? What should veterans and entrepreneurs in general be thinking about?
So generally, when someone comes and asks for financing for acquiring a business, they come to me in either two stages, either pre or post LOI stage. So they either have identified a business or they haven't identified a business. Starting with individuals who have not identified a business, but they know they're in the ETA space and they're searching at the moment. First thing I'm going to ask them for is a personal financial statement and as a resume. Because the top two things that I am concerned about as a lender is cash flow and experience. And if you don't have any direct industry experience, at least have some transferable experience. The one thing that we are trying to stay away from, and a lot of lenders are trying to stay away from, is if you've got a background in nursing, why are you buying an HVAC company? Really, I mean, honestly, I'm seeing a lot of situations like that out there. So we're going to be taking a lot of deep looks at your experience. And if you don't have that electrical contracting or plumbing contracting experience, that direct industry experience, at least have something transferable. At least have something on your resume that you've been able to manage a process and people and a systems within either the contracting industry or some similar industry that we can take what you have done historically and be able to put, yes, you will be highly successful when you take this over. And when it comes to cash flow, prior to targeting a business, we want to see that personal financial statement. It's going to be difficult to lend somebody who gives a personal financial statement and maybe has $20,000 in their account. They're not really going to be able to buy that large of a business or any type of business of substance that's going to attract a lender. So you have to have your ducks in a row with how much money you're going to put down. If you're looking for $1 million business, you want to have at least $120,000 in the bank already and trying to get more because we're going to want to have to see some post-closing liquidity as well. So personal financial statement, resume, two biggest key components. If you are post-LOI, you have an LOI in place or an IOI in place, we're going to want to take a look at the financial stability of the business you are buying. Generally, I like to see pre-LOI, and Vince might get into this as well. We want to make sure that the LOI that you're putting in on the business matches what we see from a cash flow perspective for evaluation. Is it really worth this from a banker's lens?
And just build upon that before we get over to Vince. I'll just tell a little bit of an example of a story where recently I'd mentioned to help an elevator business get acquired by a veteran. And, we had introduced to the bank and PFS was the first approach. And his background was in software sales, right? So it's like, hey, why are you getting in from software sales into being a business owner in the elevator industry? And I think the translatable thing on his end that I think worked with the bank and hopefully with resources up this way is like there's a lot of things that you learn. He was an Air Force pilot and had a lot of background in going through high stress events, and going through and owning a business will be not as nearly as stressful, but stressful in different ways, and just really showed his grit and tenacity and his willingness to really be pragmatic about why he wanted to be an entrepreneur and what team he was surrounding himself with.
And it's good to have a background like that because buying a business like that definitely has its ups and downs.
Yeah. And then additionally, I love it. I got the ups and downs. So I love it. Yeah, and so beyond that, right, from a financing perspective, even as this veteran, right, like might not have the entire cash flow to meet the equity position that's needed from the gap from the bank, and that's why you surround yourself, in that scenario with myself and another business partner, where we came in and provided a part of the equity infusion that was needed to support the veteran to buy the business. So, long story short, definitely having the right relationship with the right banking partner goes a long way. And then obviously getting yourself in a position from a financial standpoint personally, and then also the business that you're buying from the LOI that you frame up, making sure it's a good deal that gives the confidence from the bank and the other investors that are going to support you.
And definitely if you are raising the fund, if you're having investors come in with you, have that already lined up prior to your search. Because the last thing you want to do is go under LOI and now you're searching around for money. Because now I'll tell you right now, the one thing that kills deals the most is time. So the more time you allow to pass, the more that deal has a high likelihood of dying on the vine. Either the seller walking away, the banker getting fatigued, or you just finding, can't get yourself out of the weeds.
Exactly. So as a veteran, is kind of building that plan, I'm going to pass this over here to Vince, right? You might have your personal financial statement ready. You want to be an entrepreneur. You're not exactly sure what industry. How do you kind of help people from a sourcing perspective kind of narrow in on what their thesis should be and how should they think about sourcing a specific deal?
It's a good point. And we would really like to work with buyers that you have your buy box identified early on in the process. You want to, this is on, right? You want to know kind of, yeah, just checking. You want to get that buy box defined early on in the process. And then with veterans in the room, you have a lot of trusted partner organizations that you can leverage to find opportunities. There are plenty of people that you could work with, plenty of agencies that you could work with that could serve up listings. But fit is so important, as you've been hearing on this panel, from not only the success factor in somebody taking over a business, but in securing the proper financing. So we would want you to definitely have some of those ideas in mind of what geographic territory you're looking at, which was brought up, what's the size you're looking for. Being pre-qualified, having a buyer getting pre-qualified is helpful to help us match the right opportunity with the right buyer. And then, when you're looking at opportunities, you want to watch out for red flags. You want to look out for excessive owner dependency. You want to look out for excessive customer concentration over 30%. You want to watch out for questionable financials or excessive add backs. Those are some red flags you kind of just want to look out for. Just do a little bit more digging, a little bit more due diligence, and a little bit greater understanding so that you can make sure that you're focusing on the right opportunity. Fit is so important. It will drive your success going forward. And, I love the examples of why is a nurse looking at buying an auto repair shop, or, that those things are very, very important to take into consideration up front. And I can't underscore how important it is from an experience standpoint. From the banker's view, they want to lend money to people that they know could be successful, and the industry experience is important.
So want to make this interactive as well. So if anyone has any questions at any point, feel free to raise your hand, can come out and source some questions. I thought while we have a couple different experts across the equation here, what if we just kind of did a scenario here of, all right, let's just say you're a veteran or you're an aspiring entrepreneur and you've identified a business in the space. I've got an idea of one, but anybody from the audience have a specific business that we could kind of run through as an example here? If not, I'm going to pick a plumbing business if anybody is fine with that. But does anybody have a specific category? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, let's do a non-emergency medical transportation company.
I actually finance one.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Hey, this wasn't planted. Yeah, this wasn't planted. But let's walk through that scenario, right? Like maybe you start off, Patrick, just kind of walking through, hey, you've met someone, they are aspiring entrepreneur, they found an opportunistic deal over here through Vince, and we're trying to get, Ryan to finance this business, right? Like let's walk through how you would set them up for success and how the broker and the organization would be involved, and then how that ultimately would get to the next steps. Then what resources from there would be needed. So I know a little unconventional, but I'd like to walk away with maybe a tactical output here. Maybe you end up buying this business at the end of this. Oh, you did? Oh, you already did this. Okay, so we can build off of that. So.
So first off, hopefully you're not coming to us when you're actually under LOI for the non-medical transportation hospital or ambulance company. And ideally you're coming to us early on. Like ideally you're someone in the room who's interested in potentially being an entrepreneur. You've identified the fact that of the entrepreneur tracks, you would like to be mostly a acquisition entrepreneur. And then we help prepare you. So we do a couple different things. So one is doing basic financial literacy to make sure that you understand that your basic financial baseline of when you come out of the military, whether it's your disability, whether you have pension, how are you using it, and then acquainting you to then certified financial planning for acquisition. So understanding that, hey, when you buy something, typically the horizon of you exiting it, Usually it's about 10 years plus. So looking at that, what do you want to do with the business if you grow it after 10 years? What's your succession plan? Just like you're investing in a 401k. And then the second part is that we want to make sure that whatever benefits are available to you or entitlements that are available to you via VA benefits, that you've gotten them all. So as an example, again, I'll pick on Ali. Is Ali still here? Yeah, Ali's still here. So Ali has a 90% rating. Is that okay? Sorry if it was too late for me, it already came out of my mouth. So I feel like somebody else I know that says a lot of things on mic with that should probably wait. At any rate, so at 90% rating, that's great. And that was probably your initial rating. So 100% rating, especially in the state of Florida, gives you access to a whole gateway of extra stuff. And one of the things that we do is we introduce people that can actually increase their rating. So trying to get them as much entitlement as possible, because when eventually I introduce them to Ryan, I want to make sure that I can talk to Ryan about the fact that Ali has a consistent income source and his wife has a consistent income source that is non-negotiable. It's not even a W-2 one. It's something that he's going to get paid for the rest of his life, and it's going to be a very specific amount of money that's going to be able to help him get an underwriter to come across the line and be able to finance it. The next thing that we do is we introduce him to someone like Ryan early. So now that he's actually gotten his idea of how much cash flow he needs to be able to get out of the business in order to pay himself, in order to build his retirement, now, and is his geography nailed down, he's going to talk to Ryan or someone like Ryan early and say, okay, this is kind of what I'm thinking. At that point, then ideally you'll get a letter from Ryan, and then Ryan will then we'll introduce them to someone like Vince using something we call the buyer's bulletin. So we have, right now as an example, 14 active searchers around the United States. We have vetted partners like Vince who get that list of people that we have out. So if an opportunity comes up, they then contact us. We then put it in front of the veteran that's the right veteran who's a good fit. Saves Vince time, saves us time, and we're providing people out. So now I would turn it over to Ryan, who would be next in line.
So we're talking about financing the non-emergency medical transportation company. Okay. So I did one not too long ago called Go Seniors, transporting non-medical from hospital to doctor visit, from home, back and forth. So when we took a look at it, there were several different factors that I wanted to consider first. Number one, we got past the experience situation, the down payment, and cash flow looked fine. What I really needed to take a look at is there were 25 vehicles. So we had to take a look at the make, year, model of those vehicles. How well of condition are they? Because the one thing you don't want to do is buy this company, and then the next thing you know, you got to replace 4 of those vehicles because they broke down, because they were held together by duct tape and shoestrings, right? So we want to take a look at how old those vehicles are, the mileage, make sure that they've got a useful life on them that's going to last you down the road. And if not, we're going to have to hit you with some capital expenditures, because that's how we're going to look at the cash flow. You might have a seller's discretionary earnings of $250,000, but because you've got 25 vehicles that are all approaching 10 years, we may have to hit you for about $50,000 a year in capital expenditures because of the amount of repairs that you are going to have in those vehicles. So as a financial institution, we have to take a look at that. And as a buyer, you're going to have to consider that as well, because the seller might have just been getting by, just slapping duct tape and glue on it and making the cars run. But in reality, to keep with the safety standards of the state, when you do buy it, you're going to have to go through inspection with the state, depending on your state. In Michigan, you do. And they're going to have to make sure that those vehicles are in proper working order. And if not, you're going to have a lot of money you're going to have to dump into those vehicles or replace them. So that's the number one thing I would look at once I get past cash flow and experience, is I want to take a look at the equipment, make sure you got a good useful life on them, make sure you're not going to have any type of functional obsolescence in those vehicles going forward. And we'll have to hit you with some capital expenditure expense just to make sure you've got enough cash flow to make it down the road. Because the last thing we as a financial institution want to happen to you is that you run into a large expense, you don't have the capital to be able to put into that repairs, and you have nowhere to stub your toe. And now you're coming back to the well asking us for more money. Like, we like to give out money, but the last thing we want to do is give you out more money after we just financed your acquisition. All right? We want to make sure that you've got the capital up front to be successful. And a lot of times in this case, if you do have 10 trucks or 25 trucks that are all 10 years or older, I know I would put in what we call working capital, a large chunk of cash into the loan, knowing you're going to need to replace some of these vehicles down the line. And a matter of fact, we might just talk you into replacing half that fleet at acquisition, meaning you're buying this company for $1 million. You have to replace 10 of those vehicles right away. Now, these are going to be small vans that are souped up to, be able to take wheelchairs. So it's probably going to be at least $60,000, $70,000 per van, even if you get them used. So we'll build that in another $700,000 into the fleet to be able to upgrade it for you. That also, when I talk to the buyer, I will give them a leverage of a negotiation tactic that, hey, I know you want to sell this for $1 million, but I'm going to have to spend about $700,000 on a new fleet. So we're going to have to talk about this purchase price and bring it down some because your assets are not worth what you're selling them for. So
I was just going to agree that we happen to have a Ambulette company that we're working with right now, and the fleet quality is very important. You want to make sure that the vehicles are, well maintained and well taken care of, and so that would be a very important consideration. The other thing when you're looking at acquiring a business, any great banker is going to ask you to do a QOE, quality of earnings on the financials. How sustainable is the revenue? How are the expenses year over year? Is this a lifestyle type of a business where the owner is running a lot of personal expenses through the business, or is it a straight up, just functional business financials? And so I would say that when you're considering that type of a business, another thing that we would look at is what is differentiating, what makes it unique. Are there any special language, requirements of the clients? Do you need to have drivers that match language requirements of the clients? Things like that would be important from a fit standpoint. And with these businesses that are on the market right now, everybody's looking for asset-heavy businesses because of the new depreciation rules that are coming. It's not just about having asset-heavy. You need balance sheet in an organization. You need to have sustainable, repeatable revenues that have consistency. And those are some of the things that we would advise both the seller and the buyers about when we're contemplating a transaction.
Can we talk about cash flow? Yeah. Real quick. All right. Sorry, I'm going to stay on topic, but switch it a little bit. I just want to talk about cash flow real quick because as a financial institution, cash is king. All right, we'll put that right out there first. We got to make sure that you guys have cash and consistent cash to be able to repay us, because we're not just lending you guys money because we're good people, because all of us bankers are, fantastic people. We're lending it because we want it back and we want to make some money on it too, right? So let's talk about cash flow. A couple things that Vince brought up that I want to kind of elaborate on are consistent revenue trends. All right, we just got out of a pandemic, COVID, right? So you're going to start seeing some wonky stuff from 2020 to 2023, right? You're going to start looking at some companies that might have had a boost because of COVID. Non-medical transportation companies might have been one of them if they were still operating and they were operating appropriately depending on the state. So you might see some really great revenues in 21, 22, and then something happened in 23. And then 24 is back up, and then 25 is back down again. Something's going on there. What we've been seeing a lot in the ETA space is that it's a seller's market, all right? And sellers are trying to get as much money for their business as they can. And a lot of them are being consulted and having consultants out there on not illegally manipulating their revenues, but using the tax system to manipulate their revenues and their cash flow to get the highest amount of SDE possible for the largest amount of sale. Now, a good lender, a good banker is going to be able to see right through that. And that's one of the trends that I'm seeing here in 2025 is when I see good revenues in 21, 22, 23, all of a sudden is the outlier that it's down. 24 is up, and then 25 is just okay. What we're seeing a lot of businesses doing is they're taking those numbers from 23 and they're just pushing them into 24. They're holding back the expenses and they're realizing the expenses in 23, pushing the revenues in 24, and man, 24 looks great. Oh, we got some great cash flow. We've got higher revenues. Man, you did something different to that business. This is definitely worth that 5-time SDE that you're asking for. I'm in. But in reality, they just use the tax system to kind of manipulate some money around. So as a financial institution, we really have to look at that trend. You look at 1 year, great, that's a snapshot. You look at 2 years, okay, that's a comparison. But as a financial institution, we want to see trends. So a lot of us will ask for 3, sometimes 4 years. When I see that revenue trend and that cash flow trend that I just explained, it's very specific, I'll ask for 18 and 19 numbers. Because 18 and 19 numbers will show me the actual stabilized operations of that business, right? And so looking at cash flow, again, I love that. I already like you, Vince. As a broker, bringing up, exuberant ad backs, right? If you've got a business owner that's trying to sell you on an SDE of a certain level, and he's adding back his mobile phone, he's adding back, oh, I did some landscaping in my yard, it's hidden over here, so I'm going to add that back. Oh, here's some meals and entertainment, you don't need that, we're going to add that back. If they have to add back the nitpicky stuff to get to a certain number, that may not be the number that you want to stick with, number one, and that may not be a seller that you want to try to negotiate the acquisition of their business. Because if they're hiding little things here and there, maybe I don't want to use the word hiding, but if they're needing to pick out little things here and there from personal operations to get to a number, that may not pay the business that has the cleanest books that you want to buy. All right.
Kylie brought up earlier today about cash flow. I'm glad we're talking about it. And I think that on the broker side, we don't want to burden a seller's business, the value of the business negatively with personal expenses that are not part of the ongoing operations of the business. So there's a balance between what the seller's trying to get out of and what the buyer's trying to get into. And it's most important to the bank so that they do know from a debt service coverage standpoint and a ability to repay standpoint that the cash flow exists to not just cover the debt service, but the lifestyle of the buyer. So those cash flow conversations are super important. And, you might, as a broker, we might see something on a P&L or a balance sheet that looks a little odd. Like, why does a restoration business have a jet ski on their expense report? And you just have to kind of go through it and go through those conversations. But you've got an issue between the seller and the buyer and the bank. They have to solve for the same equation. It's cash flow.
And part of the reasons we like to look at trends too is I'm gonna give you two for instances that recently happened on transactions of mine. Is that we had a company that was selling, it was a professional services company, and what we do when we look at the numbers is we call what's spread them out, right? So we re-itemize the P&L kind of side by side so we can take a look at all the trends for the revenues and expenses and see what outliers are. I'm looking at this one guy and everything's looking smooth, 21, 22, 23, operating expenses were up. So I start looking and their professional fees went from about $2,500 a year to $25,000 a year in 23, and then $15,000 a year in 24. Nobody caught that. Nobody brought it up. So I asked the broker to ask the seller, what's going on with this? Come to find out, he was getting a divorce during that time, which is why he is selling the business. And so he ran all of his legal fees through the company, which is okay. You can do that, but it allows me to more smooth out those numbers. I was able to add back a great majority of those professional fees because let's face it, you're not going to go through a divorce every single year, so you hope not. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you never know. Now I'm having nightmares. But yeah, so we can take a look at stuff like that and be able to smooth out the numbers and add things back. So just because it's not traditional add back doesn't mean that we can't add it back. So when I see outliers like that, we will ask the questions. A good professional is going to ask questions, broker or lender, just to find out so that we can smooth the numbers out. Other things that I find out is if it is a family business, right? You have a family business and let's say, I don't know, you've got 8 kids, right? And you've owned this business for 30 years and you have maybe 2 of the kids that legitimately work there, but everybody's on the payroll. All right. And everybody's on the payroll. So I make 2 comments to that. Give me the W-2s for all the children that are not on the payroll. Number 1. Number 2, find out if those kids that are on the payroll are going to stay or are you going to have to replace them after they leave? And those children that are on the payroll but don't work there, we're going to, trust but validate that they don't work there. And if they don't work there, we will add that back to cash flow because obviously that's not an expense that's going to be incurred once you take it over. But those 2 kids that are not going to work there, that are going to leave when dad leaves, that do work there, keep in mind that's not an add back because you're going to need to replace those salaries. Maybe we'll do a market adjustment. Maybe they're getting paid $150,000 to be a secretary. I mean, you could probably make a market adjustment on that, but you are going to need to find replacements for them.
I don't want to keep taking, just one other thing you made me think about. But
No, we're talking cash flow, man. This
telling you,
is
it's all about
this is
cash
the
flow.
grit right here. They're getting good stuff.
your businesses that have real estate, if the owner of the business also owns the real estate, watch for market rent on the P&L. Sometimes a business owner will either not charge themselves market rent or charge themselves an excessive market rent in the business so that they could normalize their income. So just make sure that when you're dealing with businesses that have real estate, when you're looking at the P&L, validate that it is market rent. And, we'll normalize it or we'll adjust it either up or down, depending upon the answer to that. But it's important for you to know. And that's one of the benefits of working with a broker. We would kind of get that cleared out up front so that you know what you're getting into when you're going to see a bank.
Yeah, and that's the big benefit of working with a good broker and a good lender like Vince or I, so make sure you get our numbers, is that we are going to try to walk you through a lot of this and point it out for you.
And then, so just to give some truth in lending, I would love to say that 3 years ago when we started all this stuff, I had a whiteboard and I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. There's Vince, he's in Cleveland. I got Ryan, he's in Michigan. I got Alex in Cincinnati. Everything's going to work the way it is. What was interesting is that I really started this out trying to help one guy that was trying to acquire, because I was overseeing the mergers and acquisitions and valuation services at Anderson in Southern California. And I went to Duke and I had a pretty good network and I was like, hey, I think I could probably help some people. And it was so frustrating for me within the veteran nonprofit space that it was so fractured. And then I found the Ryans and the Vinces and the Alex that were all doing it by themselves, and you can see how animated they get. And when they talk about helping veterans specifically do this stuff, like that's why the network that we're building specifically is so powerful. So I can't imagine, like, if you go through an ETA accelerator and you get 3 weeks and you get a lot of this stuff crammed down your throat, how you're going to be able to retain most of it to then be able to go out and know that the broker you're talking to is a good broker, because the likelihood that you're going to be a serial acquirer is pretty low. The likelihood is that you're going to buy one business one time in your life and you're going to exit it one time in your life. So it's a super high critical event. And what you need is someone that is able to mitigate the risk for you. So being able to have vetted, serial entrepreneurs like Alex are better enabled because he has a list of brokers. He has a list of banks and bankers. So when stuff comes up, deals come up, they contact him. He's like, yeah, this is a good deal. I'm still looking. I also have investors. Someone like Alex could be, just like you were for Peter, and capital partner instead. So, hey, I helped doing this stuff. It's interesting. I think Peter maybe needs a little bit of help because I've been through this a couple of times. I'd love to be able to participate in some capital and make sure that this is going to happen. So like this ecosystem sort of existed, but it was all extraordinarily fractured before. And our goal and the reason that we're here today is to allow you guys to know that when you're doing this, you don't, like, this is a great event. Like the Osborne ETA Symposium is a great event, but being able to say that you're going to digest all this information and be able to, like, I got it Monday morning, I'm going to go buy a business by Thursday, is that the goal is to be able to say, hey, I got Ryan's number, I got Vince's number, I got Alex's number, I got Patrick's number. If I need help, I know where I can get help, and I know I'm not going to get thrown under the bus. The bad side of this is that one of the veterans in our program, and it turns out dozens now, because we have about 300 people in our program, dozens of veterans in our program have engaged buy-side brokers that I'm sure Vince could talk about ad infinitum about how predatory sometimes that pool is. And the worst case scenario is after 18 broken LOIs and diligence on 18 different deals over the course of 12 months, one of those veterans had completely exhausted his TSP account and was $115,000 in debt and never bought a business. And I would love to say that that's an abhorrent, strange one-off thing, but the longer we've been doing this over the last 3 years, now we have, no joke, almost 30 people in our program. Average dollar amount they've spent on never getting an acquisition is $50,000. And so it's crazy. And so we want to be able to make sure you're maintaining all of that for yourselves, that you're approaching the ETA much more like an executive MBA, where you have a W-2 job or you have an MRS. So MRS means you have a spouse that has good income, so you can actually search. Either one, so that therefore you can then spend time being able to do this stuff, but you're not hanging yourself out and burning through what is ultimately going to be that cash flow that's going to be necessary for you to inject into the business. So don't if you can help it, don't do that. Try to find partnerships, whether it's Primus Partners or us or whatever. There's people out there that want to make sure you're not spending that money from people that are otherwise just value extractors.
Yeah, to kind of build upon that, to ask you guys each maybe an additional question is, we've talked about the various stakeholders here that can support, but we all know that the lawyers and the accountants are other two really important counterparts to this, and that is where there can be a fear of what you had just talked about, the kind of sunk cost deal. How do you recommend partnering with those two kind of intermediaries to support, and how entrepreneurs can kind of navigate through that?
I'll start and then I'll give it to you. We were actually kind of talking about this at our table. I think it's important for everybody to understand the role of the partners that you're bringing to the table. Role clarity, responsibility clarity, action clarity, really important, because there are a few ways that a deal could go sideways with incorrect advice from a lawyer, incorrect advice from an accountant, incorrect advice from a banker. So you just want to make sure that people are giving advice on what they were engaged to give advice on. Do you really want a accountant giving advice on, the clients of a medical transportation company? You want them to give you advice on the financials that are driving the numbers. So just make sure that you understand what everybody's role is and collaborate. As brokers, we're intermediaries. We work in between the sellers and the buyers and the landlord of the real estate opportunity. So we're talking to the whole group that surrounds the seller, the whole group that surrounds the buyer, and the whole group that surrounds the real estate. And so we're the kind of the connector between all of those different constituencies that support you in getting your business acquired. But I think role clarity and action clarity, responsibility clarity are important.
Yeah, that's critically important. Don't sign anything without your attorney reviewing it. And you're not just having your attorney review it for accuracy or any gotcha stuff. You're having your attorney review it so that they can speak it back to you in layman's terms, so that you understand what you are signing. Attorneys are so critical because you have 3 different attorneys on every deal. You've got your attorney, seller's attorney, and bank's attorney. All right, and they're all looking out for who they represent, right? So you have to make sure that you have an attorney that speaks legalese with each other. I sometimes just turn away transactions with a buyer that refuses to hire an attorney. You have to hire an attorney, or you're not going to know what you're going to get into. You have to help them draft up your documents, your articles of incorporation, your operating agreement. As simple as it may sound, as simple as they may be able to find on LegalZoom, have your attorney do it, because you're going to be in this business for a long time. All right? Your accountant. Talk to your accountant before you close on the deal. Talk to your accountant before you sign that purchase agreement, because maybe a stock purchase may be more advantageous for you with that industry. And when you find these players, when you find your accountant, when you find your CPA or you find your attorney, make sure they're transaction attorneys. Make sure they specialize in M&A in your size. So you don't want to hire a corporate attorney if you're buying a small non-emergency medical transportation company. All right. So you want to find somebody that works in your space, in your field, in your space, transactional wise. And if you could find someone that understands your field, that's a big bonus too. Same with the CPA. When you interview a CPA, make sure they're not just a 1040 guy. Make sure they do a lot of 1020s, and make sure they understand corporate finance or business finance and business tax advantages and stuff like that, because that's going to be an advocate for you to save you on taxes to Uncle Sam. Right.
Quick question out of curiosity for Ryan and Vince. Are there any key companies you guys are looking at or helping out with? If you can say stock purchase or asset purchase for those.
That's a great question. So I did one that was an asset purchase, and I did one with a stock purchase. And the reason why they went with the stock purchase is because they had contracts in place with hospitals that they didn't want to have to break and re-sign. So they did a stock purchase there so that they didn't have to, and then they had the attorneys just assign those contracts to them so they would not have to go back to the hospitals and have them re-signed.
That's a good point and something that you want to know up front. We actually had a transaction that started out as an asset purchase, and it had to flip to a stock purchase in the middle of it because of that exact same issue. The contracts don't easily convey in an asset purchase. It was very complicated in the middle of a transaction to flip it from from an asset to stock purchase. But finding out some of those things up front would be helpful to do the right.
With licensing too. You know, depending on your state, some states allow for the corporation to hold the license instead of the individual. So in those cases, it's much easier to do a stock purchase. Just keep in mind, there's advantages to both. When you're doing a stock purchase, you're also taking upon any hidden liabilities out there too. Hidden lawsuits, issues that might have happened 2 years ago, and you're getting sued next year. Well, that wasn't me. Well, the company looks the same. So it was you. So there are things now. There's reps and warranties that you're going to sign. The sellers are going to sign some reps and warranties. There's some other legal documentation that you and the seller sign that can somewhat save you from a lot of this, but it's not bulletproof.
I had a similar experience. I was asset first and pushed out the deal in 3 months to switch to stock. And I had to get with my lawyers and really fine tune my reps and warranties.
That's where a good attorney comes in, right there.
We might have one quick question that we could allow if anybody wants to ask anything additional.
Cash flow.
Anybody have anything specific? Go ahead.
That's a great question from the gentleman from Huntington Bank. I would love to answer that question. Yeah, so trends are going to be crucially important, and it really depends on how the bank has set this up with the business valuation. I know for our financial institution, we like to take it on a trend basis. So they'll take the 3 years of SDE, they'll normalize it, and then they'll come up with a value with a valuation. A lot of SBA lenders like ourselves want to get at least 2 or 3 different types. So they'll get a discount method, present value of future cash flow method, which is going to give more stress to the most recent years, especially if they're on a growth trajectory. Right? Let's say they started in 2019, now it is 2025, and their revenues and cash flow have been doing this the whole entire time. Well, we're going to want to weigh more towards the present value of future cash flows based on the current operations and weight it more heavily towards the most recent year in the interim for that valuation, because getting it 3 years ago when they were still only 14 contracts and now they're 28 isn't going to do much for you. So to answer your question, it depends, but with the 3 different valuations that they have, discount, multiple, and present value of future cash flow, why we get all 3 of them. And so we'll weigh towards one depending on the circumstance of the business.
Valuations are important. You know, as working with the broker is going to do a broker's opinion of value and give you the most probable selling price. In our case, we include that in our services. Some people charge for that, just the broker's opinion. But even when we do a valuation and a broker's opinion of value, the bank is still going to do their own independent valuation on the company. And it's got to be within a certain tolerance in order for the deal to actually go through. So we have to be right up front within a certain tolerance. But just so that you know, there are other valuation tools that you could use. We've got different levels of paid valuations that we could apply with certified appraisers, that if you'd like to purchase a valuation, you could have that goes with you wherever you go.
All right, thanks again to all of our panelists. We have Vince from Transworld, Ryan from First Internet. We have Alex from the University of Cincinnati. Appreciate everybody coming up here. We'll be in Cincinnati tomorrow at the Disabled American Veterans to have another event for ETA down in Cincinnati. We'll be here, I think, every other year. Thanks a lot to Kurt for moderating the event, and thank you again to Jackie and Weatherhead and the Promise Partners for having us. Appreciate it.
To our panelists, just on behalf of Promise Partners and Case Western, we just want to give you a token of our appreciation here, so don't go anywhere.
Oh, swear. That's good. That's why I didn't make your shorts. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.